Tantor Audio, a division of recorded books, presents Gender-Born, Gender-Made, Raising Healthy Gender-Nonconforming Children by Diane Ehrensaft, Ph.D. Narrated by Coleen Marlo. Forward by Edgardo Menville, M.D., M.S.H.S. The setting is our parent group in Washington, D.C., in the basement of the church where we meet monthly. The children are playing in an adjacent room while the parents sit in a circle and discuss their latest experiences and their fears and hopes for their children. A knock on the door is followed by the triumphant entry of two little boys draped in lace, pretending to be two matching brides. Layers of cloth are wrapped around their bodies and heads, making dresses, veils, and trains that keep getting in the way of their small feet. Fancy jewelry complements the over-the-top outfits. "Let's walk down the aisle," one says to the other, and they proceed to march around the circle of parents, taking little steps. They are beaming with joy. The sight is reminiscent of the opening scene of Ma Vie en Rose, when the protagonist, Ludovic, descends the stairs in a princess costume and made up to perfection to meet unsuspecting neighbors for the first time. There is none of Ludovic's gravitas in these boys, only joy. Ludovic only smiles after the crowd cheers. They take him for his sister. He assumes that the cheers celebrate his glamorous beauty. Do I see a tinge of the excitement that comes from transgression? The spark of satisfaction that comes from getting away with small, forbidden pleasures? Or is it the joy of cooperative play, in which individual fantasies mesh in perfect creative unison and flawlessly coordinated execution? When the boys finish circling the parents, they exit the room amid appreciative applause. It is rare that children come to the parents' room. This was a special offering, a proud show of an artistic achievement. The discussion in the parent group resumes. The questions raised by gender nonconformity are complex. The parents grapple with their children's safety and what might lie ahead for them. They raise questions of fairness, freedom of expression, sexuality, individuality, tradition, creativity, continuity versus change, pleasure and renunciation, bullying, and femininity and masculinity in multiple combinations and permutations. Simple answers are elusive. In the same group meeting, a parent tells us about a children's book that is likely to win a statewide competition in which early elementary school students vote for their favorite book. In the book, the cat character tries to wrest control of the story's narrative from the author. After a struggle, the author puts the cat in a pink tutu. The cat is utterly mortified and gives up. The parent remarks on the delighted response of schoolchildren who are in on the story's joke about social emasculation. She observes that this scene is not generally used as a teachable moment to criticize the devaluation of femininity or to raise awareness of the social opprobrium experienced by males who express it. This, the parent sees, is an example of the uncontested gender indoctrination of children that makes her son vulnerable to peers' taunting. Socially sanctioned parenting scripts are ubiquitous and yet often invisible. A potent one is that parents must inculcate proper gender roles in their children at all costs. That was the starting point for the parents in our group, as it is for all parents. But over time, the cumulative evidence at home has shown that expectations of strict gender enforcement are neither realistic nor advisable. Knowing that children who deviate from gender mandates are susceptible to social exclusion, these parents must instead learn to support their children as they walk through social minefields, figuring out their own steps. A person's gender is no more and no less than a creative individual achievement, and yet it can only develop through social exchange. It is informed by biology, culture, society, and the times in which we live. But it's not clear in what proportions these elements contribute, or whether all these ingredients are really necessary. Diane Ehrensaft, Ph.D., does not advocate the elimination of gender, but a loosening of its mandates, allowing the boundaries to be blurred. She proposes shedding the gender corset to create room to breathe, room to grow. She shows us that gender is different things for different people, and she makes a compelling case for allowing children and adults to play with gender, without the severe punishments often inflicted on those who are making up the rules of the game as they play it. She helps us open our eyes, minds, and hearts, so we can see and hear beyond the surface in order to help each child find his or her own truth and flourish. Let people be, and let's support who people are. The proposition is simple, but the road to that goal is fraught with obstacles. Gender-born, gender-made brings to our homes, schools, and clinicians' offices a wealth of ideas and tools that will prove invaluable as we move toward a more empathetic, just, and inclusive society. Edgardo J. Menville, MD, MSHS, is the director of the Gender and Sexuality Development Program and of the Gender and Sexuality Advocacy and Education Program in the Psychiatry Department of the Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. He started a national outreach group for parents of gender-variant children in 1998 and later a gender and sexuality development clinic. He is also an associate professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at the George Washington University. An internationally recognized authority on childhood and adolescent gender and sexuality, Dr. Menville has been quoted in the New York Times and Newsweek. He lives in Washington, D.C. Introduction. Princesses, Priuses, and Penises. Can't everyone see I'm a girl? I'm a princess with a penis. I'm a boy in the front and a girl in the back. Kind of a Prius. A hybrid. They got it all wrong. I do not want to be a girl. I just like to dress up. 3 young people, a boy, a girl, and a boy respectively, describe his or her gender-creative journey through childhood in the 21st century. Each of them, in his or her own way, does not accept the binary concept of boys will be boys, girls will be girls, prescribed by and promoted in our culture. 2 of them are questioning whether the gender assigned to them at birth is really who they are. The third is questioning the culture's gender policing of dress-up and cross-gender play. Their queries and explorations are what qualify them as gender-creative. Their travels will not be easy, and that is why I am writing this book. To carve a path toward gender health for all the children and youth who go against the normative gender grain of our culture. We can never know the exact moment of conception, but when I think about the birth of this book, I always go back to a particular moment in 1980. It was evening, and the fog and the chill had come over the Berkeley Hills right through the front door of the warm and usually cozy home where my then 3.5-year-old son attended the preschool that was his beloved home away from home. The directors, 2 wonderful sisters who couldn't have been better at getting the finger on the pulse of all that little people need to grow, along with the then love of my son's life, the clinical psychology graduate student doing an internship at the program, had asked that my husband and I come in for a special meeting. As much as they adored our son and his blissful spirit and creativity, they were worried. Why? We asked. Because Jesse repeatedly announced that he wished he were a girl. Therein began a long journey of advocating for our gender-bending little boy. Even in a setting as free to be you and me as Berkeley and the San Francisco Bay Area, and even in a preschool as open and progressive as the one he attended, the world was truly not ready to receive a male tutu-wearing porcelain doll collector who only played with boys who played with girls. For years I went on to live my life, raising a son and a daughter who both liked dolls and frills, and open up my clinical practice to children and their families who played outside the binary gender box. I am remembering yet another moment from those times. It is 1984. The doorbell rings. It's Casey, one of Jesse's close friends from down the block, coming to look for Jesse to play. She's known Jesse since they were 2, as they both went to that same preschool that worried about Jesse's possible gender disorder. My mother, who is visiting, runs up to Jesse's room when she sees who's at the door. "Jesse, your friend's here. Hurry, take off the clothes." Now, she wasn't asking him to do a striptease. She was engaged in an urgent intervention, getting Jesse to take off his layers of filmy pink and rose-colored nightgowns before Casey saw him in them. Nightgowns that were actually cast-offs of my mother's, meant not for him but for his older sister's dress-up box. Jesse's grandmother loved him dearly and was only trying to protect him from social humiliation, believing that his drag dress-up routine should remain in the privacy of his home, or maybe his room, kind of like masturbation. Jessie's mother, that would be me, had other ideas. That if Jessie wanted to dress up as an ethereal fairy, that was just fine. So, back to Casey. Hopping up the stairs to the second floor, 2 at a time, in she sailed. Jessie had paid not a whit of attention to his grandmother's storm warning. Casey trotted over to his bedroom, peeked in, and with neither a flinch nor a moment's hesitation, piped up, "Oh, hi, Jess. Want to play?" And off they went, Jessie in his layers of chiffon, Casey in her jeans and boy's T-shirt. In those 5 minutes we had enacted a fine moment of 3 generations making gender. A grandmother who felt queasy about her grandson's cross-gender expressions and only wanted him to be safe and protected. A mother who was spending hours and hours sorting out how to meet her gender-creative son where he needed to be met. And her son and his little friend who gave it not a second's thought and couldn't see what the big fuss was about. And not one of us could yet know that Jessie would someday grow up to be a gay man seemingly quite content in his male gender identity. Now, so many years later, it is I who am the grandmother. I watch my granddaughter in her adamant insistence that she will not wear a dress. Pink is her least favorite color in the whole world. In contrast to both her uncle and her mother, she rarely has played with a doll. I try to attend all her softball games and marvel at her grace as a natural jock. And I am now old enough and wise enough, I hope, to know that her own journey in finding her unique gender self is a work in progress that will unfold over many years and with all our support, including from her great-grandmother, who is still alive and well and has definitely come around to being a firm advocate of gender-nonconforming children. Yet it is not my personal stories that I want to showcase in this book, but rather what I, as a developmental and clinical psychologist, have set out to learn about the biology, about the developmental milestones, about the intricate choreography between nature and nurture, about our social constructs and our social mores that weave together to create such incredibly unique gender options for every child. The particular children I am interested in are those who transgressively and creatively define themselves as outside the traditional binary boxes of boy-girl, and are desperately in need of someone to speak on their behalf. It may be 4-year-old Seth who likes to wear dresses to school, but ask him any time and he'll tell you he's a boy. It may be 6-year-old Sarah Jane, who used to be Craig until making it clear over and over again that they all got it wrong. You may think I'm a boy, but I'm not. I don't feel like a girl. I am a girl. It may be 7-year-old Maggie who says, I'm both, a boy in the front and a girl in the back. Some people like to refer to these children as gender variant, but variant has a somewhat negative connotation of other than normal, not too far off from deviant. Some people like to place these children on a gender spectrum, with the understanding that children can slide along the spectrum from one pole to the other, male, female, allowing for incredible variation along the way. But a spectrum is a very two-dimensional linear concept, and doesn't give full weight to the myriad possibilities in establishing one's true gender identity. So I would like to refer instead to a gender web, in which there are intricate pathways in 3 dimensions, side to side, up and down. This web will have to take into account any particular child's assigned gender, that which appears on the birth certificate, the child's gender expressions, those feelings, behaviors, activities, and attitudes that communicate to both self and other one's presentation of self, as either male, female, or other, and the child's core gender identity, the inner sense of self as male, female, or other. A large number of children will find a fairly good match between their assigned gender and their core gender identity, and their gender expressions. But a fair number, and it seems a number that is steadily increasing, will not. Those are the children who find themselves in my made-up category of gender creative, a developmental position in which the child transcends the culture's normative definitions of male-female, to creatively interweave a sense of gender that comes neither totally from the inside, the body, the psyche, nor totally from the outside, the culture, others' perceptions of the child's gender, but resides somewhere in between. In this day and age, raising a gender-creative child is still never an easy matter, despite years of hard effort on the part of feminists, gay and transgender activists, and progressive gender specialists who make room for broadened expressions of gender as a healthy, rather than pathological way of being. I've never been shocked, but have nonetheless felt chagrined as I bear witness to the hard road these families travel, watching their children insist on following the directives of their inner desires and wishes in the face of aspersion from a surrounding culture that attempts to impose prescriptions and proscriptions for appropriate gender behavior. Most disturbing to me was coming to realize the harm done to these children if they fell into the wrong hands, the hands of my own profession. As a clinical psychologist, I am bound by the oath that dictates the actions of all medical and mental health professionals. Do no harm. Yet all around me, physicians, psychiatrists, and child therapists are doing just that, in clinics and private practice consultation rooms where parents are advised to take away their little boys' dolls and pink tights, or make their little girls grow out their buzz cuts. Mothers and fathers are directed to ignore or punish their children's inappropriate gender expressions, and pay attention to or reward only the gender-appropriate ones. And families are sent home to make sure the gender-nonconforming children are redirected to same-sex friendships and to their same-sex parent as the main or only parent to identify with. In such treatment, considered by its critics to be a form of reparative or conversion, which with the scrambling of a few letters could be read as coercion therapy, parents come to learn that until they follow through with this treatment regime, that has as its ultimate goal their child's conforming to binary gender norms and accepting his or her assigned gender, their child will be stuck with the stigma of a psychiatric malady, gender identity disorder, as clearly laid out in the Mental Health Bible, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Yet I opened the January 2009 issue of Pediatrics to learn of a large-scale study by Caitlin Ryan and her team of researchers, which found that young adults whose parents supported their gay and lesbian identities showed good mental health outcomes, whereas those youth who were not supported had a higher incidence of poor mental outcomes, including depression, suicidal feelings, thoughts or attempts, sexual acting out, and drug abuse. Holding these findings in mind, I know from my own experiences and others that some gender-creative children are undergoing reparative therapies aimed at setting them binary, a variation on setting them straight, and they become listless or agitated, long for their taken-away favorite toys and clothes, and even literally go hiding in closets to continue playing with the verboten toys or wearing the forbidden clothes. And I think to myself, we have no more time to spare. I had first thought that before embarking on this book, it would be best to wait until we had more large-scale scientific outcome studies, such as Caitlin Ryan's group, now targeted not at gay and lesbian young adults, but at gender-nonconforming children and youth. But I felt a pressing urgency to speak out with the call for action right now. More and more children are coming forward and expressing themselves in gender-nonconforming ways, at a moment when such children continue to be harmed by outmoded or misguided practices that treat their gender creativity as disease rather than health, and do everything possible to ward off budding homosexuality or transgender identity. Although harmful, these practices still dominate the field and are reflected in the continuing reliance on gender identity disorder as a valid assessment of children who go against the grain of gender norms. As a licensed mental health professional, I have tried to take my oath very seriously, and I see doing no harm not only as my individual, but also my collective responsibility to children and their families. I feel I can no longer wait to share what I've learned from listening to my young patients and from having the opportunity to join with their families in helping their children grow healthy and strong as gender-creative children. Some transgender, some gender fluid, some of whom we don't yet know where they will land. So I write this book, perhaps prematurely, understanding that I have so much more to learn. Most important, from the children and their parents, and that we and my like-minded colleagues are just beginning to embark on a long project of re-examining what it means to be a gender-healthy boy, girl, or other in the 21st century. Those who either practice or advocate reparative therapies will argue that we already have sufficient scientific evidence to demonstrate that it would be best for children to accept the gender assigned to them at birth, and the treatment by both professionals and parents that is designed to curb children's cross-gender identifications demonstrates good results, including allowing the children to fit into society and protecting those children from potential ostracism and rejection. This would include the clinical research of Drs. Kenneth Zucker and Susan Bradley in Toronto, and Dr. Richard Green at UCLA. Others, like myself, question whether those results, in which children learn to accept who others want them to be, are read through a biased lens, do not have adequate long-term outcome studies, are based on a selected population of children, and lack a comparison study measuring the outcomes for gender-nonconforming children whose parents refused, sometimes even fled from, such treatment for their children. In other words, we challenge whether those studies tell the whole or real truth about children's gender health. As part of that challenge, I would like to offer a new lens, one that casts gender nonconformity in a positive light, in order not to squelch but to facilitate it. It is also a lens that can see clearly the vibrant polyglot of gender-creative children. Looking through this lens, we see children who declare to us, sometimes at a very early age, that the gender they are is not the one they were assigned at birth. We locate gender-fluid children who slide along a gender spectrum or weave their own intricate individual patterns along the gender web. In both past and present days, we have known the gender-fluid child as the androgynous child or the tomboy, or in more pejorative terms, the sissy boy. We zoom in on gender Priuses. I am borrowing this from a term coined by Maggie, a 7-year-old gender-nonconforming child I saw for a single consultation. You will recognize her from the opening quotes of this introduction. Maggie wore only boys' clothes, including boys' underpants. Girls' ones give me wedgies, and walked through my office door looking like any other gender-normative boy in my practice. But then Maggie swirled around and flaunted a long, blonde, meticulously coiffed braid cascading down her back. Then we have my own coined term, gender Tauruses. Rather than being a bull on the bottom and a man on the top, gender Tauruses are children who are aware of their genitalia and other gender assignations of those organs, but know that the rest of their torso can speak a different story. So said one assigned male 4-year-old child, Lex, again, in our very first meeting. You see, I'm a girl on the top and a boy on the bottom. Just as a footnote, in the following meeting, our second session, Lex announced to me, "Now I'm all girl." I wondered with Lex whatever happened to the bottom half, the boy half. Lex looked me straight in the eye and explained with great aplomb, "Oh, it just walked off, so now I'm all girl. You can call me Lexi." We may also encounter proto-gay children, boys and girls who are on their way to declaring their gay identity, and first explore and express their non-heterosexual selves through playing at the gender margins in early and middle childhood. Many, but not all, gay men will indeed report a childhood history of going against the norms of appropriate gender behavior as children, but ultimately growing to embrace the gender assigned to them at birth as they embraced others of that same gender as the objects of their desire. We have the queer youth of today who like to keep people guessing and wonder why we have to categorize by gender at all. And then we have, as one teenaged patient of mine described herself, gender smoothies. Just take every part of gender and mix it up and you have me. All of these children and youth qualify as gender creative, if that is defined, as I explained earlier, as living in a space that is neither dictated by the inside nor the outside, but resides somewhere in between. All of these children bring together a rich and varied palette of the possibilities of gender uniqueness, rather than the old-fashioned strict Dick and Jane gender dichotomy. Children and youth beyond the gender binary. Transgender children. Children who declare, sometimes at a very early age, that the gender they are is not the one they were assigned at birth, but the opposite one. Gender-nonconforming children. Children who do not abide by the prescribed gender of norms of their culture. Gender-fluid children. Children who defy the norms of binary gender and either slide along a gender spectrum or weave their own intricate individual patterns along the gender web. Gender hybrids. Children who experience themselves as a combination of girl-boy. Type 1, gender Prius, a half and half boy-girl. Gender type 2, gender Taurus, girl, boy on top, boy, girl on the bottom. Gender smoothies. Children and youth who take all aspects of gender, mix them up, and come up with a blended sense of gender that is me. genderqueer youth, children and youth who reject binary gender categories altogether and focus on establishing their own unique gender identity, neither male nor female. Proto-gay children, children who play along the margins of gender in the context of their journey toward a gay identity. Proto-transgender youth, youth who first declare themselves as gay or lesbian and then discover, often in late adolescence or early adulthood, that they are actually transgender and had used sexual identity as a stepping stone toward their transgender true gender self. In the spirit of creating this new lens, I would like to devote Gender-Born, Gender-Made to helping families and professionals untangle gender and learn to identify each child's unique gender web as they listen to the children and help them be the most authentic people they can be in their gender identity and expression. The princess with a penis is very different from the girl-boy Prius, who is very different from the dress-up boy, who is different from the gender smoothie. If we are not able to make these distinctions, and if we lump all the gender-creative children together, we may simply create new ill-fitting boxes of gender-nonconforming children and unwittingly promote unhealthy, if not dire outcomes for everyone who deserves to be recognized as his or her unique gender self. The two spirits, or third or fourth genders, of Native American culture do not live as either boys or girls, men or women, but somewhere in between, having the spirit of both the male and female within them. They have often been healers, artists, mediators, and leaders, recognized among their people for their flexibility and expanded perspectives. They signify the postmodern concept of gender fluidity, except they go back to pre-modern times. The two spirits show up early in childhood. It's natural. They were born that way. It is their nature. In the words of Osh-Tish, a third gender member of the Crow tribe, "That is my road. I have done it ever since I remember because I wanted to do it." Since it was in the child's nature, Native American parents knew not to try to change the child. Instead, they were to allow the child to either cross genders or live as both. This is exactly the model that informs my work with gender-nonconforming children and their families. The difference is that, unlike Native American tribal culture, we do not live in a society that supports our two-spirited children. Instead, we want to classify them as male or female, based purely on the sex assigned to them at birth. Like the white man who disseminated the Indian nations and in the process either murdered or forced the third and fourth gender individuals to live in accordance with binary gender norms, there are those today who would wish to see gender-nonconforming people totally eradicated. There are mental health professionals whose aim is to make gender-nonconforming children gender-normative. That is, to force them to accept the gender associated with their genitals, rather than with what their mind and heart tell them. The model of ensuring children's healthy growth that I will present in this book does not have that aim. Instead, it follows the child's lead and goes where the child takes us. It assumes that the child most likely comes to us with his or her gender creativity intact, rather than being shaped after birth by hapless parents who have some gender-skewed agenda or are incapable of setting appropriate limits for their children and providing proper gender guidance. My greatest hope is that this model will prove reparative of the harm heretofore and currently done to gender-nonconforming children by our dominant culture. In presenting this model to you, I also hope it will serve as a tribute to all of the parents who have turned to community and professional organizations and individuals that honor and foster their child's unique gender self, understanding that it is located somewhere within a beautifully spun web, rather than within one of two stark boxes. Such parents recognize, accept, and affirm their children, rather than trying to bend their twigs or break their spirit. Unfortunately, they, like the Native American elders who accept and embrace two-spirit or third and fourth gender members amid their communities, are not looked at kindly by the outside world. In particular, by members of professions that work with children and youth. My son Jesse's preschool directors, who were worried about Jesse's gender dysphoria, were not pleased that we were not. Doctors Ken Zucker and Susan Bradley, in their book Gender Identity Disorder and Psychosexual Problems in Children and Adolescents, found troubling the decision of two parents not to have their son, Ben, treated at the Child and Adolescent Gender Identity
Sample complete. Ready to continue?